In the desert, Moses saw an unforgettable sight, a bush ablaze, yet not consumed. Was it a divine miracle or a chemical explanation? Get ready to unravel this mystery that spans millennia, weighing faith against science in search of the truth behind the burning bush. The biblical narrative, an unshakable pillar of diverse religious traditions, describes the event of the burning bush with details that have captivated and intrigued human imagination for millennia. In the book of Exodus, we are transported to the arid desert landscape, a place of silence and introspection where Moses, then a shepherd, tends to his father-in-law Jethro's flock. It is near Mount Horeb, also revered as Mount Sinai, an imposing and mystical peak on the peninsula of the same name, that Moses' routine is abruptly interrupted by a spectacle that defies comprehension. He sees a bush, a common shrub in the region, engulfed in flames. However, what makes this vision not just unusual, but profoundly enigmatic and the core of our investigation, is the paradoxical nature of this fire. The bush was burning intensely, yet, supernaturally to human perception, it was not consumed. The leaves and branches, though surrounded by vibrant fire, remained intact, neither turning to ash nor being carbonized. Initially, Moses, with the curiosity of a keen observer, might have interpreted the scene as a peculiar natural phenomenon, perhaps a dry bush that had caught fire in an unusual way and would soon extinguish itself. However, the persistence of the flame without destroying the plant matter awakened in him a deeper attention and a sense of awe. The biblical narrative emphasizes that Moses decided to turn aside to see this great sight. It is at this moment of approach and contemplation that the phenomenon transcends the merely natural to become a theophanic manifestation. From the midst of the fire, a voice speaks, revealing itself as the very God of his ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God's first divine instruction to Moses is charged with a command of reverence and holiness. Do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. This symbolic act of removing his sandals not only demarcates the space as sacred, permeated with divine presence, but also prepares Moses for the overwhelming magnitude of the revelation and mission that would follow. The light and heat of the bush, instead of harming, were an invitation to proximity, but a proximity that demanded recognition of the sacred. The burning bush, therefore, is not merely a shrub on fire. It establishes itself as a tangible and paradoxical symbol of divine immanence, a portal through which the eternal communicates with the temporal. The divine purpose behind this apparition is clear and of cosmic proportions. God was revealing himself to Moses with an epic mission to free the Hebrew people from slavery in Egypt and lead them to the promised land. The inherent strangeness of the phenomenon, the fire that burns without consuming, served a strategic and profound purpose. It captured Moses' full attention, aroused his curiosity to the point of drawing him closer, and, crucially, prepared his spirit for the immense responsibility, divine power, and trials that would be conferred upon him. The bush was not just a visual miracle. It was God's signature, his omnipresent presence, and his absolute power, manifested in a way that defied human logic and heralded the beginning of a new chapter in salvation history, leaving an indelible mark on the soul of Israel's future liberator. This is the starting point for our investigation, where the sacred meets the potentially explainable, and the mystery of the burning bush begins to unfold, inviting us to explore its multiple layers of meaning. The idea of fire that burns without consuming seems, at first glance, a direct contradiction of the laws of physics and chemistry that govern combustion. However, throughout human history and various geographical regions of our planet, surprising natural phenomena exist that, in distinct ways, can evoke the image and mystery of the burning bush, presenting characteristics of persistent fire that does not destroy the apparent substance, sustaining it in the traditional manner. Exploring these natural parallels offers us a fascinating lens through which to contextualize the possibility that the event on Mount Horeb, though laden with profound religious significance, might have had a basis in specific geochemical or botanical processes of the region. One of the most prominent and well-documented examples are spontaneously combusting natural gas vents, often referred to as eternal flames, or, in some cultures, evocatively called gates of hell. The region of Azerbaijan, for instance, is world-famous for its burning mountains, like the iconic Yanadag, where natural gas continuously escapes from underground through rock fissures and ignites. This phenomenon creates a flame that burns incessantly, day and night, for centuries. The fire, in this scenario, is fed by a constant and uninterrupted flow of gas coming from deep within the earth. This generates the illusion of a perennial flame that, crucially, does not consume the soil, rock, or adjacent vegetation in a rapid and destructive manner like a common wildfire. The flame hovers above the surface, sustained by a fuel that replenishes itself inexhaustibly for human perception. For an ancient observer, without knowledge of complex geological and chemical dynamics, the sight of such a persistent and seemingly innocuous fire would be, at the very least, inexplicable and, most likely, attributed to supernatural intervention. Other notable examples include the eternal flame at Chestnut Ridge Park, New York, where a methane leak from underlying shale sustains a small flame that burns continuously behind a waterfall. Similarly, in the Devasa region, Turkmenistan, the infamous Door to Hell is a natural gas crater that has been burning non-stop for decades. In all these locations, the essence is the same. The fuel is gaseous and continuously supplied from underground, allowing the flame to exist without consuming the physical structure around it permanently. Additionally, although less direct in their analogy with the bush's persistence, there are phenomena involving plants with high concentrations of volatile oils and flammable resins. Certain species of eucalyptus in Australia, for instance, release essential oils that, on hot, dry days, can evaporate and form a highly flammable vapor cloud around the tree. If a spark ignites this cloud, the flame can briefly engulf the tree in an intense burst. The fire consumes the volatile vapors and, in many cases, not the woody structure of the plant itself, or at least does not irreversibly damage it immediately. This creates the impression of a clean fire that seems to appear and disappear without consuming the underlying material. The plant Dictamus albus, known as the gas plant, is another remarkable example. On warm, calm nights, it releases a mixture of volatile oils that can be ignited to produce a flash of flame that causes no visible harm to the plant. These contemporary examples invite us to consider a fascinating perspective for the burning bush: the possibility that the event witnessed by Moses, though imbued with profound and undeniable religious significance and interpreted as a divine miracle, might have had a basis in specific geochemical or botanical processes of the region that were, at the time, completely incomprehensible to the human mind. The Sinai region is geologically active, with potential for faults and fissures that release natural gas, and the presence of vegetation with flammable properties cannot be ruled out. Understanding these modern phenomena does not, in any way, diminish faith or the power of the biblical narrative. On the contrary, it expands our admiration for the complexity and mysteries of nature, showing how what was inexplicable to one era can begin to have an explanation for another, and how the miracle can sometimes find roots in natural processes that we are only beginning to fully decipher. To unravel the possibility of the burning bush being a natural phenomenon, it is imperative to delve into the fundamentals of the chemistry of combustion and explore how the theory of flammable gases can offer a plausible explanation for the fire that does not consume. Combustion, in its most basic essence, is an exothermic chemical reaction, meaning it releases energy in the form of heat and light, what we perceive as flames. It occurs when a fuel substance reacts rapidly with an oxidizer, usually the oxygen present in the air. For this reaction to occur and sustain itself, three crucial elements are needed, forming what we know as the famous fire triangle: the fuel, the oxidizer, and a heat source sufficient to initiate the reaction. In the enigma of the burning bush, the main point of questioning is precisely the apparent absence of the bush's consumption by the flame. Here, the hypothesis of natural flammable gases emerges as a strong candidate for a scientific explanation, one that harmonizes the visual phenomenon with the laws of chemistry. Gases like methane, ethane, or propane are light hydrocarbons, odorless and colorless, that are naturally generated in various geological formations. They can arise from underground deposits, such as natural gas reservoirs, or be a product of anaerobic decomposition of organic matter in swampy soils, sedimentary formations, and even in caves or rock fissures. The theory proposes a specific geochemical scenario for Mount Horeb, a geologically active region with characteristics conducive to such phenomena: constant gas emanation from underground. The Sinai Peninsula region, where Mount Horeb is located, is geologically complex, featuring tectonic faults, rock fractures, and porous limestone formations. These structures can act as natural conduits, allowing gases to migrate from underground to the surface. The theory suggests that a fissure or geological fault near the bush could have been releasing a continuous and stable flow of methane gas from within the earth. The persistence of the flame would therefore be directly dependent on a constant and renewable supply of this gaseous fuel, coming from an inexhaustible source beneath the earth. Gas accumulation and ignition around the bush. Once on the surface, methane, being lighter than air, would tend to rise and accumulate around the local vegetation such as the bush. The plant, in this case, would act as a structure upon which the gas concentrated, forming a flammable cloud around it. The initial ignition of the gas could have occurred from various natural sources present in the desert environment: a lightning strike during a thunderstorm, a spark generated by rock friction, or even a geothermal heat source beneath that brought the gas to its ignition point. Sustained combustion of gas, not plant matter. This is the crucial point for unraveling the mystery of non-consumption. The fire Moses witnessed would not, fundamentally, be burning the solid organic matter of the bush itself, but rather the flammable gas that surrounded it and was constantly replenished by the underground flow. The flame would be a phenomenon occurring around and slightly above the plant, fed by the upward flow of gas. As long as the gas supply was continuous and there was enough oxygen in the air to sustain combustion, the flame would persist. The bush, being the physical structure that served as a substrate and concentration point for the gas flame, would not be consumed directly because the primary fuel would be renewing itself, and the heat generated by the gas combustion might be diffuse, enough not to char and destroy the plant structure immediately. It's analogous to a blowtorch that burns the gas flowing through it, but not the metal tip of the blowtorch itself. Singular appearance and ancient interpretation. For an observer from antiquity, without advanced knowledge of geochemistry, gas physics, and thermodynamics, the sight of a bush ablaze that, remarkably, did not turn to ash would be an extraordinary event, completely inexplicable by the natural laws then known. The description of fire that does not consume would be the most precise, vivid, and impressive way to describe a phenomenon where the vegetation remains surprisingly intact despite the visible presence of intense flames. This scientific hypothesis does not, in its essence, seek to refute the profound religious significance or the faith of those who believe in a divine miracle. Instead, it offers an additional lens through which the physical phenomenon of the burning bush can be understood within the parameters of the natural laws that govern our universe, enriching our appreciation for the complexity and interconnections between geology, chemistry, and human perception. Science, in this context, does not diminish the sacred, but offers a new dimension to the mystery. The most intriguing and, for many, The most paradoxical aspect of the burning bush narrative is the central claim that the plant burned, yet was not consumed. How is it possible for fire, a universal agent of destruction, react with oxygen from the air? This reaction is a process of chemical bond breaking, releasing a large amount of energy in the form of heat and light, and forming products like carbon dioxide, water, and, crucially, solid residues in the form of ash, which are the inorganic minerals that do not burn. For the bush not to be consumed, the fire would need not to be interacting directly with the plant as solid structure in a way that completely degraded it, and transformation to be present so intensely without degrading the matter that, by its nature, should be its fuel? The chemistry of combustion, combined with the flammable gas hypothesis, offers some fascinating and plausible explanations for this apparent paradox, transforming the inexplicable into a set of complex physical-chemical interactions. Under normal conditions, when organic material like a plant burns, a vigorous oxidation reaction occurs where the complex molecules of the fuel. Let's analyze the possible chemical explanations, based on the theory that the flame was fueled by a gas emanating from the ground and surrounding the bush. Gas combustion versus biomass combustion. The fundamental premise supporting the non-consumption is that the flame Moses witnessed was not the bush itself burning, but rather the flammable gas emanating from the ground and enveloping the bush. The plant, in this scenario, would merely act as a physical support for the gas to concentrate and burn. The intense heat and visible flame would be predominantly concentrated in the area where the gas was combusting. That is, in a cloud of gas slightly above the plant's surface or around it, and not necessarily in direct, prolonged, and destructive contact with the bush's leaves and branches. Think of a gas stove flame. The gas burns, but the metal burner does not get consumed. The bush would function like a wick for the gas flame, without itself being the primary fuel that gets depleted. Insufficient temperature for total carbonization and heat dissipation. For plant matter to be completely carbonized and turn into ash, it needs to be exposed to high temperatures for a considerable time. Pyrolysis, the thermal decomposition of organic materials in the absence of sufficient oxygen for complete combustion of cellulose, for example, begins around 250–300 degrees Celsius. And complete combustion requires even higher temperatures, typically above 400 degrees Celsius. If the gas flame was relatively mild in terms of radiant heat on the plant's surface, or if the generated heat was rapidly dissipated by the open, ventilated desert environment, the bush surface temperature might not have reached the critical and sustained point necessary to initiate and maintain its internal combustion and structural degradation. The flame might have been visually impressive and emitted light and some heat, but not the destructive, concentrated heat required to incinerate the plant completely. High moisture content in the living plant. The water shield. Living plants, especially in arid environments where water retention is vital for survival, contain a significant amount of water in their tissues, sap, and cellular moisture. Water has a high specific heat and a high latent heat of vaporization. This moisture content would act as a natural cooling and protective mechanism for the bush. The heat radiated by the gas flame would be absorbed by the water present in the plant, which would then evaporate. As long as there was enough water to be vaporized, this thermal energy would be consumed in this phase transition process, effectively keeping the plant's temperature below its ignition point and protecting it from complete combustion. It has a similar principle to boiling water in a paper cup. The paper doesn't burn immediately, because the water inside it absorbs and dissipates the heat, preventing the paper from reaching its combustion temperature. Gas composition and clean combustion. A gas like methane, when burned under ideal conditions with good oxygen supply, can produce relatively clean combustion. This means the reaction primarily releases carbon dioxide and water, with few visible solid byproducts like soot or ash. Natural gas flames are often blue or light yellow and produce significantly less smoke and solid residue than burning biomass. This cleanliness of the flame, in contrast to the dirty, destructive burning of a wildfire that produces a lot of smoke and ash, could have contributed to the perception that the bush was not being destroyed, as there were no obvious signs of consumption. The combination of these chemical factors, the external burning of the gas rather than the plant itself, efficient heat dissipation, the cooling effect of moisture, and the nature of clean gas combustion, offers a coherent and robust chemical explanation for the burning bush phenomenon that aligns with the laws of nature. This perspective does not disregard the profound spiritual and theological significance of the event. Rather, it enriches our understanding of how nature can manifest extraordinary phenomena that, for human comprehension in past eras, could only be interpreted as miracles. The burning bush, viewed through this lens, reveals the complexity and ingenuity of natural processes. While Moses' burning bush event is singular in its biblical narrative and profound religious significance, the idea of natural phenomena, exhibiting characteristics of fire without consumption, continues to intrigue researchers and be observed in various parts of the world, even in the modern era. Analyzing these contemporary cases can provide new perspectives and strengthen the plausibility of a natural basis for the event at Mount Horeb, without in any way diminishing its spiritual impact or its relevance to faith. On the contrary, it allows us to appreciate the depth of nature and the multiple layers of interpretation of historical events. One of the most direct and studied parallels are natural eternal flames, which are geological phenomena where natural gas emerges from underground and ignites, burning continuously for long periods, sometimes for centuries or even millennia. The aforementioned Yanar Dag in Azerbaijan, for example, is a vivid instance where a mountainside burns persistently due to continuous natural gas leaks. The fire is always present, and although the surrounding area may be barren due to the heat, the mountain itself is not being consumed in a continuous manner. Another fascinating case is the eternal flame at Chestnut Ridge Park, New York, located behind the waterfall. Beyond gas flames, some scientists and historians have investigated the possibility that sacred fires in certain religious traditions throughout history, which manifested in seemingly inexplicable ways or under unusual conditions, might have roots in geochemical phenomena. While these cases do not always involve a literal bush, they reinforce the broader idea that the interaction between subterranean gases, specific geological conditions, and an ignition source can create persistent and visually impactful igneous phenomena that defy immediate explanation for their time. For example, ancient accounts of sacred fire in temples or certain ceremonies could, in some cases, have been based on controlled or natural release of flammable gases. There, a methane leak from underlying shale sustains a small flame that burns non-stop, even in the constant presence of water. In all these locations, and similar ones around the globe, nearby vegetation may show signs of heating or even slight scorching, but the main structure of the ground or plants is not continuously and destructively consumed like in a wildfire. The fuel is supplied from an underground source and burns in the air, allowing the flame to exist above ground and not inherently destroying the ground or vegetation. For an observer unfamiliar with geology and chemistry, the sight of such a persistent fire emerging from the ground or a seemingly incombustible surface could, indeed, be interpreted as something miraculous or supernatural. Another area of study that connects indirectly is natural pyrotechnics in biomes with high concentrations of volatile oils and resins. While these events are generally faster and do not result in long-term non-consumption like gas flames, they demonstrate nature's ability to create impressive and ephemeral fire appearances. Biomes like eucalyptus forests in Australia or Mediterranean maquis vegetation are known to release volatile essential oils and flammable vapors into the atmosphere on hot, dry days. Under rare and specific atmospheric conditions, these vapors can ignite, creating a flashover or a kind of ghost fire that engulfs the vegetation for a brief moment before dissipating. This manifestation, though ephemeral, can be visually spectacular and, for observers without deep botanical and chemical knowledge, would appear as if the plant is burning without being immediately destroyed. The story of the burning bush, with its central mystery of a fire that burns without consuming, is not just an ancient tale. It serves as a powerful point of convergence and reflection on the limits of human understanding, inviting us to ponder the intricate and often delicate relationship between science and faith. Each of these lenses offers a valid and profound perspective for interpreting the event, and the true richness lies, perhaps, in the ability of both to coexist in our quest for meaning and knowledge. On one hand, science, at its core, is the relentless pursuit of unraveling the how of the universe. Armed with the scientific method, observation, hypothesis formulation, experimentation, and data analysis, we seek patterns, laws, causes, and effects, striving to reduce seemingly inexplicable phenomena to a series of comprehensible and, ideally, replicable processes. The hypothesis of flammable gases, the physical-chemical properties of fire, the behavior of moisture and plant matter, all of these are rational and empirically based attempts to explain the burning bush. This approach values reason, detailed observation, and the ability to test and verify theories. For science, the anomaly of a fire that does not consume is a problem that demands a logical solution, which can be found in geochemistry, botany, and thermodynamics. Scientific inquiry, in this context, does not aim to discredit the narrative or faith, but rather to fit it within a framework of natural knowledge, transforming the miracle into a rare and extraordinary phenomenon, yet still, in principle, governed by the universal laws of nature. On the other hand, faith offers a dimension that transcends the purely material and the verifiable by scientific methods. For millions of people around the world, the burning bush is not merely a physical phenomenon or a geological event. It is, above all, an event charged with unquestionable spiritual and theological significance. It represents the tangible manifestation of God, the sanctification of a specific desert location, the direct and unmistakable call to a prophet, Moses, and the prelude to the formation of a divine covenant with humanity. Within the perspective of faith, the possibility of a scientific explanation for how the fire burned can be an interesting intellectual exercise. But it does not necessarily diminish or negate the divine why behind the event, nor the who that orchestrated it. The miracle in this context is not just the apparent breaking of natural laws, but the direct intervention of a higher intelligence in a way that defies limited human comprehension and points to a reality that is fundamentally beyond the reach of our instruments and equations. Faith invites us to accept mystery, to embrace the inexplicable as part of the divine's grandeur and transcendence. The true beauty and depth of the burning bush, therefore, may lie precisely in the creative and fertile tension between the explainable and the inexplicable. Even if science one day presents a complete, detailed, and irrefutable explanation for the physical phenomenon of the bush that burned without being consumed, perhaps through new discoveries about Sinai, geology, or the behavior of certain plants, this would not negate the profound and transformative impact that event had on Moses. It would not erase how it shaped his identity, propelled his mission as a liberator, and, by extension, influenced the trajectory of millions of people and the foundation of millennia-old religious traditions that continue to resonate in our culture. The encounter with the inexplicable, whether it be a divine miracle or rare and impressive natural phenomenon, is what frequently drives us to deep reflection, to the search for transcendental meaning, and to the continuous expansion of our intellectual and spiritual horizons. The burning bush serves as a vivid reminder of the humility of our understanding. Our perceptions of reality are invariably shaped by the tools, knowledge, and conceptual frameworks of our era. What was an unfathomable mystery and a pure miracle to Moses thousands of years ago may, with the advancement of scientific knowledge, begin to have an explanation. However, even with explanations, the burning bush phenomenon remains a singular event, an anomaly that reminds us of the vast complexity of the universe and our own limitations in comprehending it in its entirety. It challenges us to look beyond the obvious, to question what we accept as given, and to maintain a sense of wonder for what may still transcend our full understanding. In the end, the burning bush is an eternal invitation, an invitation to the scientific exploration of the physical world and, at the same time, an invitation to the contemplation of the sacred, showing us that regardless of the lens through which we observe it, the universe continues to surprise us with its majesty, its mysteries, and its inexhaustible capacity to inspire both faith and inquiry. The burning bush remains one of history's most fascinating enigmas, oscillating between miracle and science. Was it a divine intervention that defied natural laws, or an ingenious geological phenomenon interpreted as such? The truth perhaps lies at the intersection of faith and reason, where the inexplicable meets knowledge. And you, what do you think about the fire that did not consume